question that I had was, my helmet is pretty old at this point. Um, all of your helmets that you tested, I would assume, are brand new.
Brand
How
new.
do you think, age and longevity of helmets affects the actual, safety of them?
That is a great question, and it's really hard to answer because no
Yeah.
two helmets are exposed to the same environmental conditions.
Yeah.
Heat, humidity, how often you use it. I mean, and even just the different type of EPS production runs. How long it holds up. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
And so we don't. I mean, it's almost impossible to standardize that test, and so we don't do that typically. Sometimes it depends on and it might all depend on the type of impact you are exposed to. Like if your helmet gets old and dried out and it degrades a little bit, those low energy hits, maybe it's like a crumple zone in a car. Maybe it crushes and crumbles, much more easily than it was once designed to. Maybe that's beneficial. Of course, if it's a high energy impact, exactly. If it's high energy impact, maybe it crumbles too fast and maybe you don't want that. So we just don't know because they're not designed and tested under those degradation characteristics. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, would that be something that you would be interested in looking into in the future? But I guess standardizing the degradation would be challenging.
Yours might have sat in your barn in I don't know, Massachusetts, which isn't that extreme, but someone else's that sat in a barn in Mississippi it's in the sun, just dried out, and just like your car seats and your leather and things that sit outside, right? You just don't know how that's going to affect things in the long run. So, and typically, helmets should be replaced probably every 3 to 5 years anyways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially if you wear it all the time, it's probably time for another one. And well, now you're going to see a lot of advances in safety. So, everyone will probably want to get a new helmet here in the next year or two, because I think some advances will come pretty quick.
You think that new helmets will come out that quickly? Yeah,
we're already talking with 3 manufacturers, and they have ideas how to improve current ratings and what they would do new. And we have the advantage that we see all the sport helmets.
Yeah.
And we have football, we have hockey, we have bike helmets, snow sport helmets, equestrian helmet, you name it, we have it. And so we're also, a comprehensive injury biomechanics lab. So we have a pretty good idea of how to make things better from the way we test things. So, and they're all free to call us, and we'll talk to all of them. So we can go over their test results and.
I was going to ask that. Would you test their helmets for them and kind of see, where that goes?
We do, we do prototype testing.
Yeah.
Other industries, there's fees associated with that, but they get full data packages on. So this is how the helmet did. Here's the time trace we do everything. So then they're like, and so then they go back and they redesign, and so that's how, helmets have evolved. So.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, we've already started to have a wonderful conversation. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with our members, but just as a bit of an introduction, for the recording, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This meeting is being recorded for folks that were unable to join us today. My name is Tessa Archibald. I manage the Homes for Horses Coalition, which is a coalition of hundreds of equine rescues, sanctuaries, and advocacy organizations based all around the United States. Members in our Homes for Horses Coalition are really dedicated to advocacy for equines and for improved equine welfare, collaboration with each other and connection, and also continued learning, which is one of our pillars and our values and our goals. And so webinars like these ones are great to fulfill that mission. We have a wonderful guest today with us on our webinar. Barry Miller is here with us today. He is the Director of Outreach and Business Development with Virginia Tech in their Helmet Lab. So Barry Miller has a PhD in biomechanics from the University of Minnesota, as well as an MBA from the University of Delaware College of Business and Economics. So the Helmet Lab at Virginia Tech has studied helmets for over 15 years now. They've focused on sport-specific risks and the different types of impacts and concussions that can occur in those specific realms, as well as the different types of helmets that are offered. So very recently, they released the equestrian helmet ratings, which has been super interesting for all of us equestrians to look at, and for also all the manufacturers of helmets. there are hundreds of helmets on the market right now, so it's really impactful to do a study like that. Obviously, this is of the utmost importance to all of us. Whatever type of riding that you do, falls, head injuries, and helmets are just a part of our daily lives, and those of our peers. So it's super important, of course, to protect our heads as best as possible and to learn about how our helmet choices can make an impact in that way. So without further ado, I would appreciate if Barry would take it away. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me on behalf of the whole Virginia Tech Helmet Lab staff, Dr. Dumas, Dr. Rosen, and all of our student interns. Yeah, we're happy to be here, happy to share what we do. I guess for most of you that may not be familiar with the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab, we're a comprehensive injury biomechanics lab. So we do all kinds of stuff, but we're certainly best known for our helmet ratings. With the release of the equestrian star helmet ratings, it's our 9th release. And so we started with tackle football, we did youth football, flag football, soccer, ice hockey, whitewater sports, snow sports, cycling, and now equestrian to round out the 9, unless I missed one. So a little insight. I think I did a little Zoom call the other day with a large Facebook group. And when we talk about the advancements in helmet safety, I kind of made the analogy with the automotive safety world. So if you think back, I don't know, 30, 40, even maybe 50 years ago, so they started putting seatbelts in cars, and we had to wear those. And then they added the shoulder strap, and so we added those. Then they started making crumple zones in the car, and then they started putting in airbags, and now we have airbags everywhere, front, back, side, top. And now we have sensors, lane sensors that go off if you go outside your lane. Beepers go off if your seatbelt's not attached. So all these technologies keep advancing safety. And so if you look at the equestrian helmet world, so challenge 1 was to get people to wear a helmet, which was good. And I think most people are wearing a helmet. And then the next phase, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, they created standards for these helmets. So ASTM, Snell, PAS, VG1, etc. So now the helmets that you wear have to be certified by one of these organizations, and those certifications protect you from catastrophic head injury. So they're pass or fail. So all the helmets you buy today should have passed one or more of those certifications. So your helmets are safe. They protect you from catastrophic injury, which is the most critical piece. But this next phase, and we just released the equestrian ratings about 2 weeks ago or so, is now how can we actually advance the helmets to not only protect you from catastrophic head injury, but also now better protect you from concussion risk. And so this is just like many other sports. When we came out with the star ratings for football 10 years ago, 11 years ago, there was only one 5-star helmet. And now, partly due to our research, you can't buy anything but a 5-star football helmets. And then the star scores associated with those helmets continue to improve. They get smaller and smaller and smaller, which is great. Same with the bike helmet industry. There's probably 165 or so helmets on our ratings page. We started off, I think the cutoff was a 14.0 for a 5-star helmet, but now the star scores in the 5-star category go all the way down to, I think our lowest helmet's 8 point something. So they continue to get better. In other words, you can't probably buy anything but a 5-star bike helmet now because the safety level of all those helmets has continued to improve. So we anticipate the same thing is going to happen with the equestrian helmet release. We've already had several conversations with some of the major manufacturers on how they can improve their helmet designs at this point in time. When we came out, so the helmet ratings, we had 40 helmets that we took from the market. These 40 represented most of the major manufacturers, a variety of model types, price points. And so what we do when we assess those, we came out with an average score out of those 40 helmets. And then we start weighting things based on location risk, frequency of location that you hit your head, velocities, and we come up with this star equation formula, which you guys can read on the methodology page, which is a patented process. STAR stands for the summation of tests for the analysis of risk. And so when we design our test matrix, each impact or each test condition, so for equestrian, for example, we use 3 locations on your helmet. under 2 energy levels, a low and a high. So that's really 6 test conditions. And so we get information from each test condition. The sum of those 6 actually makes up your total star score. And so just like other industries, when we release the scores, most helmets were about average. There's some that were better, some that were worse. But again, this is just a starting point. We expect advances in the helmets to come pretty quick. So the average star number is 3, right? And just so I can clarify this, so the star score is the summation of all those tests that I just mentioned. That is really the value you want to look at. Based on that star score, it places you into a bin. It's kind of like a math score. If you get 80 out of 100, that's probably a B. 90 is an A. Well, with us, that star score puts you into categories 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. But what we want is a low star score, because the lower the star score, the lower risk of concussion. And so the star score for the equestrian helmet ratings, and you can't really compare the sports because they're each different protocols, etc. The star score for equestrian represents the average number of concussions you would get wearing that helmet model if exposed to the 30 impact scenarios conducted by the lab. And the reason why I said 30 is because, as I mentioned, we have 6 test conditions, 6, right? 3 locations, 2 energy levels, that's 6 test conditions. But we added a multiplier of 5 just to spread the scores to make them a little bit more interpretable and meaningful. And so typically there would only be 6 test conditions, but now it's 30 because we multiplied everything by 5. So for example, if you had a star score of 3, that would be 3 concussions on average out of those 30 impact scenarios. And you got to remember that 15 of those impact scenarios are high energy, similar to some of the certification standards. And then 15 are, on the lower energy magnitude, because that's where people typically fall off and hit their heads with low energy. So I'm going to stop there. And so you guys want to ask questions or ask me to elaborate, Tessa, and we can kind of go into some of that kind of discussion. You're muted. Yeah.
I'm muted. Yeah, one of my first questions was why you chose to do equestrian helmets. What kind of inspired you to go in that direction? I know you've done lots of different sports. So what made you start to do riding helmets?
Yeah, so from the first equestrian star ratings, 11 years ago, Dr. Duma speaks around the country, as well as Dr. Rosen. They're the founders of the lab. And he gets more questions about equestrian helmets than any other sport. And I think part of that is what you guys do in the equestrian world is risky. Horses can be unpredictable, as well trained as they are and as amazing as they are. They're still a little unpredictable. You're already starting off at a high height. So when you sit on a horse, your head's already elevated quite a bit off the ground, and then any movement. So that's a lot of energy to come down from. And some of the ways you guys fall are a little unpredictable. It's not like, football players brace themselves for head impacts. They know they're coming, they see they're coming, but when you fall off your horse, it's kind of random. And so the injuries are bad, unfortunately. And, we know, just like the bike helmet world and snow sport world, the certifications, the pass or fail is not enough. You guys need a little bit more information, and we want to evolve the sport. And so we work with the USHJA, USEF, USEA, and Jacqueline Mars, all donated to the project. So we have no conflicts of interest with any helmet company or helmet technology. And our sole purpose is to serve you, the community, and those organizations by providing, consumer-facing helmet ratings, so you guys can use that information and make informed decisions when buying new helmets.
Definitely. Yeah, you mentioned that, there's already some helmet ratings out there, or when we purchase a helmet, they have been ASTM approved or passed that testing. How does that differ from the testing that you guys do?
Good question. So the certifications, so ASTM, PAS, Snell, VG1, did I say PAS? Anyway, so those standards, those certifications are pass or fail. And the pass-fail, and they only measure linear acceleration. And the pass-fail threshold is at the level of catastrophic head injury. So skull fractures and death. So the helmets have to be below a certain threshold from a given energy drop, and they drop onto a steel anvil, similar to what we do for a lot of our testing. And as long as it's below that threshold, it passes. So you as the consumer, when you're going to buy a helmet, it doesn't matter which certification they passed, otherwise they're not legally sold. And then if I'm picking between helmet A and helmet B, I don't know which one far surpassed the threshold, or is it even important as long as they pass. So what we do is we kind of supplement those certifications and those standards with real world sport specific helmet testing techniques based on concussion risk. We started putting sensors inside football helmets 15 years ago. We have over 2 million data points. And so we have a really good idea of when these linear and rotational acceleration values get to certain levels, the risk of concussion goes up. And so helmets that best reduce those acceleration values get better ratings, right? And so, similar to you walking in, running into a wall. Well, you could pad it with different things, right? Pillows, but if you're running, then you might put mattresses and more dense materials. So you want to gradually slow down, right, all that activity. And so you avoid these quick, rapid peaks. And so helmets that attenuate that energy and do that the best get the best ratings. So more padding is generally better, right? Everyone kind of knows that, right? Bigger crumple zone in your car would probably be better than a small crumple zone. But, what's practical? How big can helmets get? And, how fast do they attenuate this energy? And I think I mentioned 5 to 10 milliseconds, these impacts, pretty fast. Wow. And so it's a challenge for helmets to do that.
Definitely. I think you mentioned, you're talking about football and sport specific testing. How did you make this testing equestrian specific?
Yeah, so this is a 2-year research project. So we went out and we analyzed all kinds of equestrian fall videos, combed through the research. We actually took head forms and mannequins and all of our helmets, and we went over to our equestrian facility. And based on what energy levels the certifications use, some of these falls that we saw on videos, we started dropping head forms with helmets on them in various locations. So we started to map, and we can kind of call these the boundary conditions. So we tested on dirt, it was really hard clay. It was a really bad surface that they've henceforth upgraded to a footings first because of our research. We also tested on sand, which is probably the most, it was loose sand, so probably the most compliant situation. And then we obviously measured grass and the footings first and things in between. So based on any time you drop a head form into a natural environment, you're going to get a time trace of that impact. And so once we figured these out, for what energy levels we figured were appropriate, we take those back to the lab and go, all right, so how do we replicate those on a very consistent, reliable basis? And, if you guys go to YouTube, you'll see, Google Virginia Tech Helmet Lab, you'll see all kinds of virtual tours, and you'll see all the different test rigs we have. So we look at all the test rigs and, with and without equestrian helmets, we say, all right, which one's going to best match that time trace? And we determined that it's our pendulum impactor, which happens to be my favorite. It's the most repeatable, easy to use. It's reliable because we can easily put the helmet in the right spot because it's all preset. We can orient the head, the neck, sliding mat, anywhere we want. And we take the pendulum arm up to the same angle. We get a nice repeatable velocity at impact, which is critical when you're comparing A and B, right? If you're just trying to meet a threshold, that's not so critical. But when we're comparing my helmet and your helmet, well, we need to make sure we test them in a standardized, reliable fashion. And so that's why we use the pendulum impactor first and foremost, because it matched the time traces of the impacts we saw in the real world. And so locations were determined by the video that we've seen, by the research out there, and then the impact energies were also by those two things. And so henceforth we came up with 3 locations under 2 energy levels. And I will say that the lower energy level is weighted more heavily than the high energy because the research shows that most people fall off at low energy and get injured versus the high energy, right? It's just more frequent. More people ride at that energy level anyways than the higher energy. But oftentimes, by the time you brace and actually fall off the horse, it's not always high energy, right? You're dangling on, and so the energy dissipates as longer you can hang on as the horse slows down and tries to stop. And then you might not even hit your head first. You might hit your butt first, your back, And so all that energy is dissipated before you actually hit your head. So we weighted the lower energy 3 times as much as the high energy. And also the certifications are the high energy threshold. So we already know the helmets have passed that threshold. Not that we don't want to test and rate it against concussion risk, but it's not as big a factor, or not as heavily weighted as the low energy. And then
That's interesting.
the last thing I'll mention is the location. So we look at location based on risk, not necessarily how frequently you hit your head in that location. We didn't have definitive data on, people hit their back of their head 10 times more than the front. Well, that wasn't definitive in the literature or in the videos we analyzed. But the risk from hitting those spots does make a difference. And we try to make sure that each location based on risk is more equally representative in the ratings, because we don't want the manufacturers to skimp on any one location. And so you could hit your head anywhere, right? Everyone agrees, even though it might be more frequent, but you still could hit your head anywhere. So we want to make sure that every part of the helmet's equally designed. And so then we put some weighting factors in that as well, based on the risk numbers when we do our initial assessment before we start, analyzing all the helmets and putting into a big batch and figuring out what's average, what's not average, and how do we weight them accordingly. So that's kind of part of the process. And that's in the methodology paper for those that want to look a little bit deeper dive.
Yeah, I was wondering about that comprehensive nature around the whole head as well. That's an important point.
Yeah. So yeah, and if you look at the weightings, you'll see that the front location, again, the risk when you hit the front of your head, humans were kind of built for that. We evolutionary wise, we're better at direct hits to the front of the head because that's just the way we're built. The side impacts typically have higher risk, even for the same energy level, where our brains just don't respond as well. We're not as resilient to those types of hits. And so but we try to balance the equation by adding these weighting factors, because you could hit your head anywhere, and the risk on the front is a little bit lower, so we weight it heavier. So I hope that makes sense. It gets a little confusing, I know.
Yeah, all the weightings and the scientific methodology. Well, to kind of, diffuse that scientific talk, I kind of have a silly question. You were talking about, analyzing the literature and watching falls. Where did you find videos of people falling off horses? Were you just watching YouTube compilations, or?
Well, a lot of them came from sanctioned equestrian events.
Okay.
But we combed through and we tried to find as many unique falls as possible. And we'll take them. We'll continue to take them. We use injury reports. We use sensors in helmets. We do damage replication studies of helmets to figure out how did that helmet get damaged. But all those techniques and ways of doing things are still incomplete without how they actually fall. The injury report kind of tells you, but it doesn't give you the full picture. Like, they hit their shoulder first, then their head, and half the times the injury they don't remember. Well, yeah, I hit my head. Well, and what was the angle? What kind of did you have any forward velocity or not? And so the videos, regardless of where they come from, are all helpful in us figuring out how does the everyday Joe fall off and injure their head, when they come off a horse. So the challenge is making sure we don't duplicate those and that they're unique videos. And most videos come from sanctioned events because that's the only place you're actually taping these things, right? I mean, if I'm out on my horse on my farm, no one's videotaping me when I fall off my horse. That'd be kind of rare to capture that, right? So most of them are from some sort of a sanctioned equestrian event. But yeah, we'll continue. If people want to send them, we'll take them. We'll catalog them. It's an ongoing process. And, at some point, if we find that we need to alter our methodology, we can evolve our methodology and include another test if need be.
Yeah.
So, so all of our star ratings are evolving. We'll rescale certain sports, like we'll rescale bicycle here soon, rescale football, maybe change the methodology or what the interpretation is of how we break things down based on new literature.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I like how you were talking about, you guys are developing your methodology and making it better every day, and, years coming, but how do you expect that helmet manufacturers are going to utilize your research in order to develop their helmets?
Yeah, so now that they had the standards to go by, all right, my helmet must pass, a drop test at, however many, at 6 meters per second roughly, and it had to be below a 250 G linear acceleration threshold. Well, that's kind of, all they really had to go by. And now they have both linear and rotational acceleration numbers. And we're not just pass failing, we're actually giving them a rating with that star equation. And so now that they know, how we're testing the helmets, they can improve the helmets based on that blueprint. And we have conversations and we go over the summary data with these helmet companies, impact location or test condition by test condition. Hey, your helmet did really well here. Look at these peak linear and look at these peak rotational numbers. And we have a risk concussion contour graphic that kind of shows you, when you start to get up to 130 Gs or 120 Gs of linear acceleration and 6,000 radians per second squared on rotation, your risk really starts to jump up. So how we want to make sure that our helmets are below those kind of thresholds. And so we go through every impact condition and they start to understand, oh, my helmet did really bad. Maybe it was the linear, maybe it was rotation, maybe it was a little bit of both. And so they can start thinking about how do we reduce, the rotational, acceleration values on that high energy hit that's a little bit off center, and start thinking about maybe we change the materials that we use. And so there's all kinds of design, variables you can start to use to improve the helmets. And
so that's how, manufacturers are going to change their helmets based on your research. How do you think your research can inform consumers and the everyday individual who is out there looking at all these helmets on the wall, saying all of these pass the standards, and utilizing, your ratings?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to like the auto world. If you're going to go out and buy a new car, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to Consumer Digest or Consumer Reports. I'll go to AAA's ratings. I'll go to Motor Trend.
With the sparkles.
Right, exactly. I'll start to look at those. Yeah. I'll look at reviews. Just when you guys shop on Amazon, right? Yeah. And before you buy most things, you go, let me look at the reviews. And I guarantee you, most you click on the good reviews, the 5-star, and then you'll go down and you go, oh, what did this 1-star person say? And you start building a matrix of, all right, how influential was that information or how important is it? And so ours is the same. So as you guys start to shop for a new helmet at some point in time, they pass the standards. And sure, if you're a high-level eventer, maybe the crush test is really important for you. The rollover accidents, maybe you need that. Maybe you don't, depending on what kind of riding you do. Penetration tests, what am I exposed to? But, it'll have to pass one or more of those standards. So that's minimal, but that protects you against catastrophic head injury. That's the critical piece. Then you can use our ratings. Folksam Insurance Institute in Sweden does similar things, but then start looking at the ratings, go, all right, now which helmets might better reduce my concussion risk? And so then you think about, all right, and there's different price points on there, type of riding, how often do I ride, how the helmet fits my head, different brands, they all have their own little molds that they use. And so every helmet fits a little bit differently. Maybe you're a Charles Owens or maybe you're a GPA or whatever. I like my shoes, my tennis shoes, I like to wear Nikes. That just, for some reason, they fit my feet better than other brands. And so a similar thing. And so what helmet's comfortable? Is it going to stay in place? And then start putting all the pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, I can get a nice high-star rated helmet here in my price range. I don't ride all that frequently, but enough. And so you start building your little, purchasing matrix to figure out, all right, what's the best purchase for me? So.
Yeah. And with that price point, I know that one of the things that I noticed was that there was a wide range of price points, even in that top 5 helmet ranking. How do you see that in other sports? Is that common?
We do see that in other sports. And if you look at our bike helmet ratings, you'll see a couple really good helmets in the $65 range. Yeah. And, some of the higher end bike helmets, $250, $300, not as expensive as equestrian helmets. But the technology's there and you could say, all right, and, coverage, how much, the bike helmets are a little different. Some of them cover like the mountain biking, cover the back of your head a little bit more than others. So you'll start to see different styles. And again, add that to your, what's a good helmet for what I'm going to use it for? Maybe I'm buying 2 helmets. Maybe I have a competition helmet and then one for everyday riding that, is not as expensive, but has, great protection and it's cheap. So I don't have to worry about it getting scuffed up and scratched and all that kind of stuff. One thing I mentioned, and I've mentioned this to all the manufacturers in some of the presentations, wouldn't it be great if you guys had a great, safe helmet for practice where you don't have to worry about how you look as you start to learn all these riding skills and tricks? And if you think about your exposure, you're more likely to get injured during all those practice events, all those hours of practicing versus competition. So I said, what if you just made a little bit bigger helmet, much more padding, and it was there for practice? And then, you know, that's where my most risk is. And if you didn't choose to wear that helmet during competition, so be it. But I think that'll be the evolution of helmet designs, that they'll get a little bit bigger, but you'll add a little bit of padding, not much bigger. I mean, 1 centimeter goes a long way even. So depending on what padding structure it is. So I think you'll see that. We saw that with football. Yeah. Football helmets are now 5 pounds, but if I showed you a picture of the inside of a football helmet, you'd see padding that's that thick. Yeah. And so, you know, the way they have the different materials and layers, it's the most advanced sport helmet on the market by far. So there's lots to be learned from that technology and those helmets.
Say that, yeah. I mean, you're talking about practice helmets. Maybe it's a little bit bigger. We don't care how we look, but you know,
but you do care how you look.
But you do care how you look. So that's kind of transitioning. You know, in our informal conversation at the beginning, we were discussing, you know, I live in Colorado now, and nobody wears a helmet out here. That's a generalization, but way less in the Western world. How, you know, do you think that your research and, you know, kind of advocating for better helmets can improve that culture, or change that culture, or inspire people to pick up a helmet and think, oh, maybe this is a good idea?
Right. Well, you've seen, so being a skier myself, and so 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when my buddy and I started skiing, I guess we were in college, it's a little bit longer than that, maybe, 40 years ago, 35. Anyway, so we didn't wear helmets. There was no snow sport helmets, skiing helmets. But then with the advent of snowboarding, because they have a lot of back slaps where they fall and hit the back of their head, a lot more riders, and they do a lot of different tricks, and they try a lot of different things. And so now when my buddy and I go out skiing, it's rare if you just see someone without a helmet. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. I mean, you can train your body, you can get bigger, stronger, faster, you can condition, but there's nothing you can do to train your brain to sustain an impact and be more resilient. And so unfortunately, some of these head injuries are lifelong. You know, it's not, oh, I'll heal, I'll get better. Hopefully you do, but oftentimes you do not. I mean, you have lingering headaches, vision, cognitive issues. I mean, it's kind of scary. And then the sport you guys, participate in is risky. Again, the horses are unpredictable. And there's a lot of energy. You guys are already at high height, like I said, and it'd be really, really smart to wear a helmet. Any helmet would probably be better than no helmet. And then certainly, one that's, more highly rated in our ratings than others, that would be super smart. So again, unfortunately, you can't protect your skull. I mean, it's really hard to do. So
without a helmet, yeah.
Your brain, I should say, your brain inside your skull. Yeah.
Indeed.
So.
Yeah, that's definitely wise, and it has developed and changed already in recent years. I think that I've seen that in the equestrian world, in the Western world, in rodeo, places like that, people are starting to wear helmets, starting to wear body protectors a lot more.
Yeah, chest protectors, airbag chest protectors, they're starting to do all that because they know, what, I just don't know what's going to happen. I'm good, I'm really good, I'm skilled, but things happen. I think it's no different than auto safety. Wearing your seatbelt. Now I don't know anyone that doesn't wear a seatbelt anymore. I mean, the beeps, it tells you have to put your seatbelt on, otherwise it keeps beeping, which is really smart, right? And they don't have 100% compliance according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. We work with them. They sponsored the bike helmet study. And so they're still working on that. But, then now all cars have airbags. Well, they all have airbags because they help. They make a difference. They save lives. So if we can save you from a concussion or reduce the severity of a concussion, that just makes total sense to wear a helmet, and then hopefully a high performing helmet.
Definitely. And I think the fact that you had so many kind of, high ranking sponsors to the equestrian study within the, multidiscipline equestrian world is kind of, indicative of that.
Yeah, so they know. I mean, they've been evolving safety, and hopefully we're going to launch a chest protection study as well.
I was wondering, yeah,
the air vest and the standard vest, they're not, it's similar to the helmets that it's pass or fail some of these standards, but the standards are really bad. They're not even, remotely close to how the human body reacts to an impact. And so there's the biofidelity is not good at all. And so it's a really technical study. But yeah, hopefully we'll get that funded. We can improve that aspect of safety as well. So
yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a great direction to go in.
Yeah. And for those that don't wear helmets, our Virginia Tech football and soccer headgear. So we have real world concussion data that says, the difference between wearing a 5-star Virginia Tech 5-star helmet and a 1, 2, or 3-star helmet. On-field concussions are reduced when you wear a high-performing helmet. And these are aggregate data. These are huge data sets. And so we've proven that our ratings help reduce real-world concussions. And nobody else can really do that. So we know this will make a difference. We know the helmet companies are going to advance the helmets. And if you wear one, you're going to reduce your risk. So wear one.
Absolutely. And I mean, for helmet companies, that's a great branding thing. Our helmets reduce concussion this many times compared to the average leading helmet brand.
It will continue to improve helmets and make everybody safer. I mean, that's everyone's goal, right? So
that's wonderful. I think that's all of my questions. I really appreciate the time that you spent talking to me and answering my questions. And I think I had a great time. I really learned a lot from you. I really appreciate it. You're welcome. And if you have follow-up questions, just email me to me. Happy to answer any questions you get from this podcast with all your viewers. And if Molly, Joanna, or Benjamin don't have any questions, we can move on. But otherwise, yeah, happy to answer any follow-up questions right now. Definitely. See if anybody has anything. They're shy, reserved. I understand. Either that or I was thorough and not confusing, which would be rare. Yes. No, you did a fantastic job. I see that we have another viewer joining us at the moment as well. So our ratings are www.bt.edu/helmet, or just Google Virginia Tech helmet ratings. It'll take you right to our helmet ratings page where you can click on the various sports, including equestrian. Under technical documents, you'll see the methodology that's really technical. But if you read it a few times, you might have a better understanding of how everything is calculated. But again, the star score is the critical piece. You want a low star score, which would place you into a better bin, 5-star being the highest, 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, I would say, these initial ratings, we don't expect a lot of 5-star helmets. Kind of like football, there was 1. And so this equestrian, we had 2. But, there's lots of room for easy improvement with these helmets. And there's lots of, if you look at the scores, they can move up pretty quick. And so, the average helmet's a 3-star or a 5.0 star score. And so kind of take that into consideration with this initial launch. Yeah, definitely. If folks do have helmets that might have, been rated a little bit lower, where should they go from that? What should they take from that? Well, I think they know that the helmet's safe for them to wear for catastrophic head injury. But the advancements forthcoming in the next year or so will be significant. And I think the choices will be pretty broad because all the helmet companies are going to want better rated helmets now that you know how to do. And like I said, it's not going to take much with our conversations. And we cut some of the helmets in half just to feel and check out the densities. And, it's pretty easy to see if the helmet's got a little bit bigger and we have just a little bit of different softer padding material, some of those scores would go up really fast, really greatly reduce your concussion risk. So we're very optimistic based on what we saw, and it's very similar to the bike helmets that we rate. So, well, it's wonderful. There's so much, easy room for improvement, and I'm, excited about this kind of impetus of research and to see where helmets go and new releases. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Pleasure meeting you. You guys take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Barry. All right. You're welcome.